I said we're going to do a little bit of review. Let's see if I can get some of these moving here. We're going to go back and talk about Abram a little bit. We showed this map. We're going to show the map to y'all too, because that'd probably be helpful. And we're gonna go back and visit some things about Abram. I'll get my notes here. Does anybody remember what I said when we were talking about Abraham moving from Beersheba up to Jerusalem to bring his son? Anybody remember how far that was? Turns out it's around 57 miles, and the scriptures are pretty clear. This is just a little piece of evidence that will come crucial later on in my presentation. Genesis 22, and it came to pass after these things, verse 1, for anybody that is following along. King James Version, that's just what I grew up on. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here am I. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there a burnt offering upon one of the mountains that I will tell thee of. And then in verse 4 it says, And then on the third day Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. So 57 miles, 3 days, but he says on the third day he could see it afar off. And I'm sure that's there. I actually sort of skip one verse that might be interesting too. And Abraham rose up, verse 3. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son and clave the wood for the burnt offering and rose up and went to the place where God had told him. These are all just little things, and there's little hints in there. So was Jesus the first person to ride a donkey into Jerusalem? With his, it doesn't say it, and maybe this is just supposition on my part, but I can just see Isaac on that donkey for whatever reason. But it says on the third day he lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. So in 3 days he didn't actually make it there, but he could see it. So that gives you an idea of how far a person can travel. Now this is a 120-year-old man, maybe a 117-year-old man on a donkey, and he's moving 57 miles, roughly 20 miles a day. That's about how far you could travel in this country with that sort of transportation. So put that in the back of your mind. And we're going to talk about a few other things while we're back talking about Abraham that add to our story. So in Genesis 25, we probably all sort of recall this as well. Sarah died, and we talked about the cave of Machpelah, and they buried her, and then he took another wife. If we'll recall, he married Keturah, and Keturah had children. Among her children were Midian, was one of his children, and it said that it gave us a couple different interesting little tidbits there in Genesis 25. First of all, it said that Abraham moved his children to the east. Does everybody recall that? Because he did not want the sons of Keturah to dwell with his son. And it also tells us in Genesis 25 where his son was. And his son was in, let me find my pointer. Anybody know where the pointer is? Well, we can work without it. We see Beersheba here, and we see Gerar. Does everybody see where Rehoboth is? That is actually the location of Laharoy as well. I'm sure maybe it's. Oh, there it is. Check something real quick. See if I can figure out how to use this again. Oh, there we go. So it would have been in this area because this is a geography class. And the important little hint is that he moved his children to the east. and hopefully you can find a better map of that. I just wanted to touch on this just real quick. This is a topography map, and we talked about Moriah, just a quick review. And I told you guys that I had a slide, and it showed the location of Golgotha, which was outside the city walls, which is important. These are the old city walls, because we believe that Christ was actually taken outside the city walls, and that Golgotha would certainly meet that. And then I was just intrigued by the fact that the elevation from sea level actually happens to be 777 feet. That just blows my mind. How could that be? Okay, so now we're going to go to this slide. Now, we're going to start with a disclaimer about this slide, because we're talking about the mountains of Moses today. And there's a disclaimer about this slide, and this is completely one of those kind of oddball things that just really sort of, I was like, I'm going to leave that in there. So Sarah got online, and I gave her a set of slides that I wanted her to use, and she's got most of those in there, but she also wanted to make some like title slides and the sort of thing. And so she goes and she has some slides AI generated. Now, when I saw it, I was like, oh no, this blows up my whole class, because if you don't pay attention, this has the mountain of Sinai over here. And there's like, I don't even know how in the world AI could have ever thought that it was there to begin with. But then it has Mount Nebo here, which is still another complete, like, crazy wrong area that it's not there. But that just, but the fact that this sort of passed as reasonable is what really this sort of class is all about when I talk about the mountains of Moses. So I just wanted to show that. But geography is important, because if you're told a fact that's in the Bible and it's wrong, what do you think about the Bible? That's right. So geography and all facts in the Bible are important. And unless it makes sense in your mind, then you question the Bible. You should never question the Bible, but it's all right. You just have to dig in a little bit deeper. Okay, so first we're going to dive in a little bit. And we talked about Midian, right? That was one of Abram's children by Keturah. And we all know the story of Moses. He is in Egypt. He slays an Egyptian, and he makes a run for it. And he's 40 years old. And where does he go? Midian. Why Midian? Sort of weird. I started thinking about that story. I started thinking to myself, wait a second, this kind of ties back to another story a little bit. Do you remember why they were in Egypt to begin with? Famine, right? That's right. And why did they go to Egypt? That's where the food was. Why was the food there? Joseph. That's the key to why they went to Midian, in my opinion. Now, if we recall the story, Joseph, his brothers don't like him. And they throw him into a well where there is no water. And then they look out and they spy a group. Look, I don't want to just talk here. Let me get some verses so we can follow along. Works sometimes. Genesis 37. And I was going to bring my Bible up here, and then I recalled that my Bible, I have 3 different Bibles, and Genesis is so wore out that half the pages are gone. But if I could I get somebody to read that for me? Genesis 37. Verses 25 and 27.
As they sat down to eat their meal, and they looked up, and they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he's our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed.
Does anyone have the King James Version and can read verse 27 for me? Thank you.
You said verse 27?
Yeah.
It says, "Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh, and his brethren were content."
Okay, so now read verse 25. I think you're going to find the Midianite reference in verse 25, maybe. 28? Well, no wonder it wasn't there. All right, somebody read 28 for me. Thank you.
Then there passed by Midianites merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, for they brought Joseph into Egypt.
So there's a couple little hints there, like whenever we're looking at this. First of all, the Ishmaelites and the Midianites are apparently the same people because their names are used interchangeably. But another hint is, what were those Midianites doing? Or the Ishmaelites, what were they doing? They were trading. And where were they going? They were going to Egypt. There was a well-established connection between the Midianites, or the Ishmaelites, and Egypt. There was a trade route. And apparently this was a normal trade route. So that is sort of important to our story as well. So I wanted to establish that. So that's why we went back and looked at those parts of Abram's life when we're talking about this. So in my opinion, going back to my original hypothesis, that there has to be a connection between being sold into slavery and coming out of slavery and having to do with the Midianites. It's just odd to me that could actually be a fact. The Midianites brought them in, and now the Midianites are bringing them out, which is quite interesting to me. And they are the children of Abraham, which we established earlier. And we're going to go back and we're going to look at that again, and it'll give us one more hint why this all kind of matters, in my opinion. So now let's look at Sinai in the scriptures, and it does in fact appear. And I'd really hope that would be a little bit better look. But we're going to go to some other ones. So the land of Midian is well established in biblical archaeology and in maps, and we know where Midian is. The scriptures are emphatic that what was Moses doing in Midian when he fled? He was a shepherd, and he met and married the daughter of Jethro, who was the priest of Midian. And there appears to be no real conflict. In fact, at least one portion of the scriptures, the priest of Midian, or Jethro, seems to give advice to Moses, and it seems to be taken. Now, if someone was a priest and they gave you advice, but they were teaching you about some false god or some craziness, you think you would listen to them? Probably not. So my conjecture is, from this whole sort of story, that these Midianites, they were the children of Abraham as well. And Abram, I'm sure that he loved his other children by Keturah, although he moved them. And my conjecture is that he taught them the truth to some degree, and that they worshiped Yahweh. And this would, it would continue through time, as we see the children of Ishmael and the children of Midian worship Yahweh, even to this day, although not perfectly. And we can imagine if Christianity was messed up as bad as it was, we can just imagine how bad that religion was messed up as well. So the point of that was that we do know where Midian was. And now what was Moses doing in Midian when he came across God? He didn't know God. He didn't know God. He was grazing the sheep of Jethro in Midian. You know where Midian is. And what happens? You all know it's a burning bush. And he comes to a place called the Mountain of God. And that's in Midian. Just want you to kind of keep that in mind. All right, so here we have another beautiful map. And it shows the location of Midian quite clearly. The scriptures tell us also that it was on the backside of the desert. It identifies Midian as being on the backside of the desert. Anybody know what this is? Where's my pointer? Well, first of all, what land? Where is this today? Saudi Arabia. That's correct. Now, what did Paul say? Where did Paul say that Sinai was? What he said. Yeah. So, does anybody know what this is over here? Yes, it is, but does anybody know what desert that is? That's the Arabian desert. That's what we know as the Arabian desert today. And the scriptures say that it was on the backside of the desert. It's sort of interesting to me. Now, there is another desert area in the other location, which is right over here, known as the Negev. But it is, a desertous region. It might be like West Texas or Mexico or something like that. But this, folks, is a desert. One of the biggest deserts on the earth. Sand dunes and all the ones, you see the camel going across, that's the Arabian desert.
Hey, Stu, by the way,
Yes.
I think it's awesome that in the kingdom that's referred to as the forests of Arabia. So what a massive change it's going to be to go from what you're describing
Yep.
to the forests.
But interestingly enough, it used to be a forest. I've seen some recent excavations where they, in the Arabian desert specifically, where they came across tree trunks that were 30 feet wide down below the sand. It's just crazy. So, yeah, Eden to Eden, rather. So, I'll go back down again. And so now here we have another big picture. And here is wherein our controversy lies, which we're going to explore today, because we're talking about the mountains of Moses. And here's a question: where is Mount Sinai? And we see quite clearly where Midian is again. So there we go. So there are, as it says, 3 traditional proposed sites, and I'm going to use some deduction to help weed through this to help us figure out where, in fact, Sinai probably is. And I guess the next question is, why does it matter? And is it essential for our salvation? Probably not. But it does matter, because we said if the Bible is not consistent, it makes us question the Bible. And if we question the Bible, our faith is taken down. And if I can't do anything else today, if I can help anyone with just a little nick of their faith, then I've done my job the best that I possibly can. So let's see. Moses' flight to Midian. 40 years old, he kills a man, he's on the run, and he goes to Midian. How far is it to Midian? We'll start there, because that might help us with our faith a little bit. I got some notes here that it would be about by air, if not on this route, which sort of follows the ancient trade route of the Midianites. But if you went by air, it's approximately 200 miles by flight. So it's not an overwhelming, it's not like 1,000 miles or something like that. It's 200 miles. That's still quite a bit. But the topography is so that you can't take a straight line, and not only topography, but here, what's important, just like everywhere else, water supports life. If you don't have a well, you don't have a way to go because you can't carry enough water. You can't physically, water weighs 7 pounds a gallon. You can't physically carry enough water in the desert to sustain yourself very far. So they had to have wells. That's just the way it was. That's why wells were so important in the Middle East and in the Bible. I mean, it talks about wells all the time. La Haroi, for instance, or Beersheba, or we could go on and on. The wells are extremely important to support life, especially if you have cattle, especially if you have small children, especially if you have elderly. And we got all those that were moving from Egypt, and we got to have a way to keep, we got to keep them alive. It's no sense of moving people if they can't even show up alive. So this 250 miles, there was a study done, and anyone can do a little research. It's called the Well of Moses study. And so they're like, well, how long would it actually take a person walking to be able to cover this distance if they follow this ancient trade route? And it was fairly interesting. 9 to 10 days was the answer. So a 40-year-old man, probably in pretty good shape. He lived to be 120, didn't he? But 40 years old, and he's fleeing, so he's got to get out of Dodge about as fast as he possibly can. And so it takes him, they believe, with studies done and actual people on the ground walking themselves, how long would it take? Generally, 9 to 10 days was the consensus. So how far is that? 250 miles and 10 days, 25 miles a day. So for a vigorous 40-year-old who likes running marathons and getting away from the Pharaoh, 25 miles a day in the desert on his feet, that's about right. And is that fairly consistent with what we looked at before? 20 miles a day, 120-year-old man on a donkey. Reasonably consistent. It makes us believe that the Bible is telling us a truth, because that seems good to me. So 200. Now we're going to talk about the children of Moses, or the children of. We're going to talk about the children of Israel, and we're going to talk about their flight. So does anybody remember when they left? This is important. Yes, sir. Yes, which is? Yes. I heard Nisan and I heard Adar, which is very good, but it's a little different, but okay. So Nisan has two names, Avid, or Avid. Maybe you've heard of Tel Aviv. Maybe. So Aviv is the first month. And we believe, this is from our conjecture and what we've studied and looked at, that Aviv actually corresponds with an event, a special event, and in a special place. Center of the universe is, that's right, Jerusalem. And what happens on Aviv 1? Aviv 1. First day of Aviv. Not in the, so we have the Gregorian calendar, right? The Roman calendar, we got 12 months, ranges from 30 to 31 days, and it continues on. We have 12 months in a year. But is that how the Jewish calendar is? No, it's based on a couple of different things. First of all, it's lunar. So lunar is more exact. It has 28 days in every month. And just so happens the first month is Aviv, or Aviv, or Nisan, depending on if you want to call it by its Roman name or if you want to call it by its Jewish name. And I heard Adar. Adar is important. Adar is actually the 12th month. But sometimes it's the 13th month, because there's Adar 2. And the reason why there can have some years 12 months and in some years 13 months, has nothing to do with 365 days of our calendar. It has to do with Avid 1, which Avid means harvest, barley harvest specifically. They could determine when their year was supposed to begin in their religion by seeing the day that barley is ready to harvest in Jerusalem. That's Avid 1. And why is that important? Because you, brothers and sisters, and myself, we're the harvest. Compose myself. Harvest is great, but the laborers are few. All these things add to our faith. All right, going back a little bit. Where are they going to? They're going to Horeb. Advance my slides here. Horeb's great too when you look at it. Okay, so here's the three possible locations of where Mount Sinai is. Am I ready to ring a bell already? Tell me not. Okay. And so we've got these on the map here. Kind of shows where they are. Okay, Horeb. Maybe this is something that adds a little nick, a little bit more to our faith. The brother last week at the gathering, he actually sort of touched on this a little bit, although he didn't use these particular exact words. So this is I found to be quite interesting. So whenever we read or we hear the word Horeb, it's just a name to us. It doesn't really particularly mean anything. It's just a name. But of course, we know that the Jewish language is not like that, and it's not just coincidental. We don't just give names like Bob or Jim to an area. They all actually have a name. And the name for Horeb refers to this is the actual word right here. This is how it's spelled. Now, I wish I was a Hebrew scholar, because if I would, I could tell you what each one of those things were, and they're actually symbols for something. And so in the Jewish mind, whenever they see those symbols, they would actually know what those would mean, and it'd be even deeper, and you'd have more meaning from it. But nevertheless, this is the word for Horeb, and it means dry ground, heat, or ruins. So Horeb, I want you to think of as desolate. That's what I want your mind to focus in on whenever we're talking about Horeb. The first use of that word in the scriptures in Hebrew actually is here, and I think it's Strong's 27:19, and it's used 400 times in the Old Testament to refer to a sword, a dagger, or a knife. And so when's the first time in the scriptures that we see sword used in the scriptures?
Garden of Eden.
David, tell us about it. That's right. And what was the purpose of the cherub? Of what? To keep the way of the tree of life. Same word as Horeb or Sinai. Keep the way of the tree of life. Coincidence? Now, they are pronounced differently, which is sort of interesting, because in Hebrew, so in English, we have a lot of words that they may be spelled differently, but they sound the same. But in Hebrew, you can have a word that is spelled the same, but sounds differently, depending on its context. So there's some pronunciations up there, if anyone else is a linguistics nerd. Where is our linguistics nerd? He's online. I doubt it. Okay, so here we have three of our locations. I'll give you guys a second to look over that. Okay. And so here is Moses' flight to Midian. Right? Now, we're going to go back a little bit. We were talking about what day did they leave. That's important. They left on the 14th day of Aviv, right? On Passover day. They were supposed to have their victuals, and their kneading troughs, and their shoes latched, and their robes their robes girded, and they were supposed to flee. And they were going to go to the mountain of God to worship. That was their whole thing. And when did they get to the mountain of God? I have a verse for you here. Genesis 19:1.
You want me to read that?
Yes, please.
This is 19. The two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway.
I'm sorry. Exodus 19:1.
Exodus 19.
Excuse me.
On the third new moon, after the Israelites had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that very day they came into the wilderness of Sinai.
That's interesting. I like that because it sort of reinforces what we were saying before. On the third new moon. So in the third month, actually the beginning of the third month. How long was that? It's actually not 2.5 months, it's 1.5 months. Because if you go back to Elam, the story of Elam, it actually gives a date there as well. Can someone read Exodus, just for reinforcement of our theory, Exodus 16, verse 1?
And they took their journey from Elam, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came unto the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elam and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their departing out of the land of Egypt.
Okay, very good. So they left on the 14th day of the first month, and they get to Elam, which is on the other side of the Red Sea, just on the other side of the Red Sea. It's their next location. On the 15th day of the second month. And then on the first day of the third month, they actually get to Sinai. Yes, sir.
Looking at your map, Moses would have had to cross these bodies of water getting to Midian as well. How would he have done that?
Well, I don't think that he would have had to, because he would have been able to go to Ebon Gezer and travel that direction in his
Go
flight.
up and down? Okay.
Right. God directed them to go to this area so that he might get himself glory, he says. And he basically had Moses as bait for a mousetrap, the best I can see it. I did hear a bell ring, but I do want to establish at this point that their trip took approximately 6 weeks, and then to go back and to break that down a little bit, and I'm going to get to my notes here. Give me half a second. A lot of pages here. That it would have taken approximately a month from the 14th day to the 15th to get to Elam. So mostly a month, minus what? 30 days or 28 days, 29 days, right? A month and 1 day. But they didn't travel on what day? They didn't travel on the Sabbath. So then they only actually had, 29 minus 4, 25 days. So you have a great host of people. Now, it takes them a month to get there, right? So I want that to be established in our head. And then it only takes 15 days from Elam to to Horeb or Sinai, and that's 15 days minus the Sabbath, would have been 12 or 13 days. Now, if you do that mathematically, and I've actually done it for us, just so we can see what sort of numbers we're talking about, and we're going to go back and we're going to compare those briefly to what we talked about before. How far can Abram travel on a donkey a day? A little less than 20 miles. That's probably about right. And how far can Moses travel walking? 200 miles? 250 miles, about 25 miles a day. So the children of Israel, do we know how many people? Not exactly. We can glean a reasonable approximate by the time they get into the land by the number of people that are surviving, which tends to be, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it's around 600,000 men able to fight. And so we don't really know an exact number, but if there's 600 men that are able to fight, that tells you about that there's 1 million, 2 million, quite a few people. Now, if you actually figure out how far they're traveling to get to the same distance, if my hypothesis is correct, they're traveling across the desert at 3.125 miles a day, and they're traveling from Elam to Horeb at about 12 miles a day. So is this reasonably consistent with the numbers that we looked at before? I think that I think it's reasonable. It's not outside reason. So this information will help us make a determination on the probable location of the Red Sea crossing, which is kind of what we're going to look at next. And it's just to add to more of our faith. Thank you for your attention.